Well, I hate to say it, but you had your chance, Australia. You could have voted for a government that, is a government, but no, you had to get your news from Peter Overton, and as a result, you get Delta COVID. I hope you're happy. Was it worth knowing where Sydney's cheapest petrol is by a margin of 2 cents? You'll never guess. It's from a petrol station called Budget Petrol. Good night, Australia. You probably already know this story, but we just need to gloat, as this really is the essence of the channel boiled down into a headline, isn't it? Scott Morrison sucks, Kevin Rudd's mad. Just to give you a quick background, Australia, as usual under the Libs, is at the top of the ladder when it comes to the most vital health criteria, which is Tarakash pants orders, but at the bottom when it comes to rolling out vaccinations. Now, I'm no doctor, I'm a doctor of beats.
Priorities, oh yeah.
But I'm not a medical doctor. However, I think the reason that we have a 7% rollout might have something to do with the fact that Scott Morrison seems to have bought our entire vaccination supply off of whether it pumps up Dave Sharma's share portfolio, not if it causes blood clots.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought the MP at the end of my name stood for my portfolio.
But it's also for the same reason we're at the bottom of virtually every OECD ranking, because the Liberals looked at the first world medical infrastructure in this country, the technological, logistical and bureaucratic triumph that is the Australian medical system. That system that makes you look at northern Uzbekistani hospitals and think, oh, suck shit. Entire programs specifically designed to roll out vaccines. The Australian healthcare system does it every year with the flu shot, and yet the Liberals turned around and said,
Hey, I know someone who could do a better job than someone whose job it is to do exactly this. My personal mate.
They gave the vaccine contract to a private company. They privatised the rollout, giving the contract to companies who don't even do this thing. It's like thinking,
we need a road built. I know, let's call Kraft.
It boggles my mind. Every time you think surely a government, regardless of the party, at some point will prioritise its citizens over its donors. Once we get to, say, having a future that looks like India's, but no, even then, yeah, that's okay, I love curries. In fact, it's un-Australian not to plunge us to the level of India because, as we all know, this nation's priorities go mateship, then public health. So given that that's the government we have to work with, a government that so instinctually favours the oligarchy that it's kind of like one of those ancient servants that wipes its master's ass for 50 years until one day he turns around and says, this is kind of weird. Despite the fact that the oligarchs of Australia are worth tens of billions of dollars, they still have immune systems, and so prominent expats of the business community went to Kevin Rudd in desperation. Look who's come crawling back to old Kev Daddy Pretty much saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, Kevin, this might come as a shock to you, but Scott Morrison's incompetent. He completely botched the negotiations. Can you have a chat to the CEO of Pfizer? I'm sure ScoMo has, but things seem to be moving at a snail's pace. Well, it turns out Scott Morrison hadn't. Surprise, surprise. He'd only spoken to the Australian representative of Pfizer. Well, why go to Disney World when we have a perfectly good BHP water park right here? BHP water park. Of course it's in f***ing Perth.
BHP Water Park, now with our newest ride, the ASIO Experience. Whoop, almost got us. Yep, nope, 7 pay taxi yet.
Then Kevin Rudd really showing up just how incompetent the entire Australian government is, as he mustered all of his superior foreign affairs minister training to pick up the phone.
A always, B, C closing, C cucks. Always be closing, cucks.
He talked to the CEO of Pfizer. He even tells Scott Morrison that he talked to the CEO of Pfizer. To which ScoMo says,
yeah, thanks for doing that, mate. I'm really swamped here at the moment.
All he does is tell the CEO about how dire the situation in Australia is, which I'm sure he doesn't know about, seeing as he has to get a vaccination out to the entire planet. He says, oh, okay, let me make some calls, and wouldn't you know it, Pfizer gets fast-tracked to Australia. Let's just slot that into the bigger picture. At the beginning of this pandemic, the Liberals f***ed up the lockdown, then they turned to Labor and said, oh, what do we do? And so former Labor Minister Greg Combay designed JobKeeper for them. That gave them a massive boost in the polls. They then f***ed up the vaccine rollout, again, because they can't get past this one point that just because someone gives you money doesn't mean they're qualified. So again, a former Labor Minister says, f*** it, I'll just do your job. At which point, Scott Morrison steps in and does his job.
PR.
The Liberals then turn around and say, no, Rudd didn't have anything to do with the contract negotiations. Look,
Here's a letter from Pfizer. He didn't have anything to do with it.
But you know who else says that he had nothing to do with the contract negotiations? Kevin Rudd. Here's a quote from his spokesman. Listen to this clapback. Mr. Rudd would definitely not seek to associate himself with the Australian government's comprehensively botched vaccine procurement program. How sick was that? I feel like some member of a 90s audience sitcom reading that. But to bring it back, this isn't about who negotiated the contract. This is about the most basic of leadership duties that Kevin Rudd took up because the Libs have left that much of a vacuum that you have to call on a guy that hasn't been Prime Minister for 8 years to talk to a CEO, and as soon as he does, just by coincidence, Pfizer gets fast-tracked. This story is just another glaringly obvious example of just how scarily incompetent the people running this country are. Put aside the corruption, put aside the willful neglect of public health and safety. They don't even think of doing something as basic as saying, "Let me speak to the manager." So now we're going to go to a poll. You ready? This is going to be a very telling one, very revealing, especially with this audience. Like this video if you think Kevin Rudd was a better Prime Minister than Scott Morrison. Subscribe too if you haven't. Get my stand-up show at friendlyjordies.com and check out my friend's rap. It's called Grand Theft Liberal. Laugh and learn, kids.
Please share and comment below. Comment.
Warning to all small business. The unions are coming.
We're coming back!
Media analysis and worm counts after it was concluded, because Abbott's actually a rat.